the first topic is just with with obviously Saturday, Michigan had a bit of a rough second half of the game. Pretty dominant, in the first half, and then the second half was kind of a bit of a struggle, let's say. So I'll start with you, Mark. Do you feel like Saturday, after Saturday, is it confidence or concern for Michigan fans?
It seemed like these teams switched uniforms at halftime. like Michigan was the dominant team in the first half, but they didn't pull away. It wasn't like they were out in front 42-0 in the game over, but they were in charge and they were dominating the line of scrimmage. They were doing all the right things, offense, defense. They were their run game wasn't clicking like it had been, but it was effective against what Greg Schiano's put together, a pretty decent football team all of a sudden. Then the second half was almost the opposite, where Rutgers was controlling the line of scrimmage. They were getting a push. They were doing some things offensively, but again, nothing great, nothing prolific. And then defensively, of course, completely shutting down Michigan. And the second half stats were, I'm sure Dre made him sick a little bit. Man, we're talking like 200 yards to 40 and 13 first downs to 1 and sorts of crazy stats like that. So confidence, I got to think when you're a competitive athlete that that there's got to, at least it's got to plant a seed somewhere that, okay, we've been trouncing all these people and we run right over them. Okay, all of a sudden, we got some defensive linemen that are clogging up some holes and some guys in the linebacking core that are making tackles on our backs. And we haven't seen this the first 3 games of the season, that there has to be a little bit of doubt that creeps in.
Yeah, I don't see. I guess I can see both sides of it because, right, you have the confidence of you had some adversity, things weren't going quite well, in the second half to where, you were still able to battle back as a team. You stuck together. Granted, on the offensive side of the ball, it didn't look great, but you were still able to hang on. And I talked about it on Saturday after the post game of just how well the defense played overall, like for the amount of plays that they were on the field. So they were out there for quite a long time. And I thought they had kind of the bend but don't break, mentality where, at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter how good of a defense you are. After a certain amount of plays, you're just going to give up yards and points. Like it's. We're not robots, they're guys that get tired and things like that. So, but on the flip side, I do get the concern and that would probably be where I would lean towards is concern because this is the first time that, Michigan is able to have the run game stopped. And that's not something we've seen in the first 3 games. So, it's one of those things where I think there's a level of concern, but as I said to start it off today, I mean, no matter what, you're going to have something to work on. So whether it's, throwing the ball or run blocking or special teams or, whatever the case may be, everything needs to improve and get better. But there definitely is a level of concern with, with how things looked versus Rutgers. We'll see what happens. I think, well, we can get into that later, but I think there definitely is a level of concern with kind of how things finished because you would like to, essentially do what you have always done, which was, second half really start to hammer teams and get that run game going to the point where, you're playing the bully ball. That would be the ideal thing that you would do, especially with that halftime lead against Rutgers. So I probably lean a little more towards concern. But, if they come out and throttle Wisconsin, I think all is forgiven. So that's my take on it. Dre, how about yourself? Did Saturday give you, more confidence or more concern with how things went with the game overall?
Well, maybe want to kind of what you see in the background, grab this pillow, out of comfort because I was in a very uncomfortable place. You know what it was. And can you guys hear me pretty good? Just want to make sure I'm coming.
Perfect.
Good.
Yep.
It was unfortunately confirmation of, the concerns we discussed the last, well, every week they played a game this season, and also the preseason prediction we gave, which is that even the better years under Harbaugh, the offense tends to be a lot more one-dimensional. And a lot of spotty quarterback play. What happens is that, especially when they start the year off at home, they're beating up on their, lesser opponents. They're able to impose their will, and then the minute they get to a game in which the talent is getting a little bit better, gets a little bit below their level, or to their level, or even above their level, they struggle. They struggle to finish drives. They struggle to keep momentum on their side. And if they lose momentum in the game, there's no way for them to get it back, because what happens is they depend on their run game, and then they find themselves in a dogfight, right? And then what happens normally when a team is down a touchdown or a couple touchdowns or a touchdown, a field goal? You need to start passing the ball more. And so that's what you're starting to see. I think you're seeing those typical issues with Michigan, is that, teams start to load the box, and now they're pretty much daring Cade McNamara to beat them. And, barring some miracle, they're going to struggle Saturday in the games going forward as their opponent's talent level gets better. So it's definitely concerning, because it seems to be trending towards the same issues of previous years.
Yeah, and we can kind of get into the QB play next. Because the thing is, the concern is not, for me, the concern's not Cade can't do it and he can't throw the ball and he can't throw for 250, 300 yards. It's just that we haven't seen it yet, and that was what I was clamoring for, and Dre, I think the same thing. We kind of all talked about preseason was we'd like to see him throw the ball in those games where you're going to have a comfortable win, so that when you do get to the Wisconsins and Michigan States and Ohio States and Penn States, that at least what you have. So that it's just an unknown. I mean, I don't think that Cade can't do it. It's just we haven't seen it yet, this year. And I'll toss it to Mark. What are your thoughts on the quarterback play? We obviously talked about the number of attempts we'd like to see, but overall, what are your thoughts on essentially Cade from this past Saturday and just his performance this year so far?
Well, I should go on record as saying I screwed up your first question, because it was confidence or concern. I read it as confidence, a concern, question mark. So I kind of took off on that. I guess you could look at it either way. So the one thing that I will say in defense of Cade McNamara and the players, and I don't want to read too much into this, and I don't want to state it like I'm a coach and I watch the game film and this is exactly what they did wrong, because I'm not that guy. I will take shots at the play calling from time to time, but I'm not the guy that says, I can call the plays better than the coaches by any stretch. They know so much more than I do. But it appears as though Rutgers made adjustments at halftime and Michigan didn't adjust to them. The two things that I saw was, one, that Michigan seemed to run the same couple running plays. Now, they dressed them up different. They'd run different guys in motion. They'd put the backs different places, but then they'd run the same, the same blocking, the same off tackle, and they ran to their left constantly. So either off tackle left or, off the guard, like the one hole right behind the center. They were running that constantly, and it was fairly effective in the first half. Well, it wasn't in the second half. So that tells me, did Rutgers make adjustments and Michigan wasn't able to counter that adjustment? Then the other thing was, Cade McNamara, he was on a 300-yard passing day projection through the first half. He was at like 150 yards passing through one half. And again, most of those routes were crossing routes where there was they were easy throws to make. They weren't tight window throws. Guys were open. Boom, they're hitting crossing routes. The one shot they took to the tight end, Eric All, it was almost kind of the same thing, but he saw in the zone where the zone was, and he just kind of sat down there, 25 yards. Boom. He's open. And Rutgers took that away in the second half. So what did Michigan do? I don't know that they did anything. It didn't seem like they did anything. So maybe that would be my concern from a strategy standpoint, that it appears as though Rutgers made adjustments. Michigan didn't counter those adjustments. In terms of the quarterback play, I just think it was a reasonably good first half for Cade McNamara. Second half, maybe it's difficult to get into a throwing rhythm when you're throwing it on third down, and then hopefully you get a first down and you get a chance to throw again. But if not, you're going to the sideline and you're punting and you get the ball back, and most likely you're running on first and second down. You know, they threw 16 passes, so they must have thrown it or run it 45 times. So it's tough to get into a rhythm throwing the ball if you're not throwing the ball. He's throwing the ball 4 times a quarter. You know, in the other games, he was throwing the ball like 9 times or 11 times. He's throwing the ball like twice a quarter. So maybe it's tough to get into a rhythm because of that.
Yeah, I'd say that's not a recipe for success. You know, throwing so few times when, you know, your run game's not being effective. Dre, what say you as far as, you know, Cade on Saturday and just, you know, the 3 previous games before the Rutgers game?
Well, I think when I think of Cade, I think of safe, the word safe. You know, a lot of times when you hear the broadcast talking about why Harbaugh likes Cade so much, why he prefers him to start, why he has started over JJ, besides JJ just being inexperienced and having to, you know, continue to learn the playbook, continue to learn the in and outs of managing, you know, a huddle and earning that respect from his teammates. It's pretty much that for Cade. You know, Cade doesn't have this job because of his arm talent, right? He has his job because he has the command of that huddle. He understands. I remember watching the Washington game, and they were talking about, you know, Harbaugh said, you know, he really, even though he's not passing the ball a lot, you know, he does a really good job of, you know, moving the chains and, you know, keeping, you know, running the offense. I'm like, what really does that mean? You know, like, especially when he's not, the ball really isn't in his hands, you know, and so I don't think Cade has done anything wrong. I just, with your first 4 games of the season being at home, I can't answer with certainty that Cade is ready to go win a road game. That's a different animal. And it's a lot easier to make throws, like Mark is referencing, when you can make them as opposed to when you have to make them. And that's the concern I have with Cade. And I put that partly on him, and I put that partly on the staff for not fully utilizing this 4-game sample size when you've been at home, you've been safe, you've been in your barn, haven't had to travel out the state of Michigan in a month, right?
How does that keep happening, by the way?
I don't know, man.
But it seems to happen every year. Where it's like their first, like all of September. It's like, no, they don't leave home. And like, hey, do it. If you can figure that out and finagle that, like, continue doing that. That's pretty awesome.
Hey, I mean, they're saving travel expenses on the books, you know, for the month of September. So that's a positive. Maybe that's why they do it. But yeah, like Michigan needs to watch their spending, right? And yeah, we're sending, that's a whole, see, you about to open up a can of worms about going to Africa and you know, wherever we're going. But anyway, you know, it's just, I still have question marks about them. And I don't feel good about this sample size of Cade going into Saturday, because I do believe, even though, and we're going to get to Wisconsin, I'm sure, even though this is not going to be a 10-11 win type season for Wisconsin, partly because I think the West is a little bit better this year with Iowa and I actually think Nebraska's I think it's in the West as well. I think Nebraska has been playing better ball as well, but I don't think Wisconsin's going to have that great season, but I still think they're a solid team. You know, they're not going to win 6 games. They'll probably end up around 8 to 9 wins. And, you know, I don't think it's going to be easy. You know, in the last 2 years you've been to Camp Randall, it's not like you've lost dogfights. No, you've gotten punched in the mouth and ran off the field. So, you know, it's just you look at all the aspects, you know, going into this game, you know, against Wisconsin, it doesn't look well for Cade.
Yeah, I think it's just the unknown. You know, I am one
That's
that I do think that, you know, just I would look at it similar to quarterback as a basketball player shooter, right? Like, for instance, Steph Curry, like, let's take him. I get it. He's a great shooter, but
The best shooter in NBA
goes,
history. Great example, Desmond.
Well, all right. Well, I'm just going to roll with it. So
Okay,
if, you know, Steph Curry takes, you know, 3 3-pointers in the first quarter, and then he doesn't take another shot until the third quarter, like, his first 2 probably aren't going in. Like, now granted, he's, you know, a bit unique, but nonetheless, it's the same thing. Like, I'm sure those attempts he'd have a higher percentage of making them if he took more shots in the second and, you know, in the second quarter. So it just, to me, like, to have Cade, you know, like I said, in the second half, I'm pretty sure Michigan, you know, went like 3 runs and out, you know, twice, to where it's just like, man, you're spending a lot of time, you know, you went into the locker room, you come out, you warm up, and then you're just handing the ball off. And they had a very long stretch of time where he didn't throw the ball at all. So it's difficult to go from, you know, from just being ice cold, essentially, of handing the ball off to now, you know, I've got to complete a pass. Like, I get it, that's his job and whatnot, but he's also a 19, 20, 21-year-old kid. Like, it's very different. So going into Camp Randall, it's going to be unique. You know, I think ideally you'd like to throw the ball when you don't absolutely have to. Like, if the only time Cade is throwing the ball is 3rd and 10, 3rd and 7, you know, 3rd and long, like, I don't think he's going to have success. And I think, if, you know, part of that is, number one, the run game, you know, making sure it's effective, but also, two, you know, play action passes. You know, the first half, a couple, you know, deeper pass plays that he had were like Mark said, slant routes, crossing routes, to where, you know, guys were catching the ball and had room to run. So, you know, you'd love to have that as, you know, part of the game plan against Wisconsin, because I think you're going to need that. Like, I just don't think you'll be able to line up and you know, run all over Wisconsin. I just don't think that's going to happen.
Situational football. It's situational football. And I just don't think they practice the right situations that they're going to need in games going forward. You know, you will on Saturday against Wisconsin, for example, have 3rd and 7s. Okay. 3rd and 8s. You know, maybe you have a penalty. Now you're 3rd and 12. You know, like, you're going to be put in situations in which Cade is going to have to, it's not going to be a quick read and get rid of the ball. He may have to go through his first progression to his second progression. Can he do that? How many times has he practiced that this year? That's where the conundrum comes into play, in the unknown, where it's like, okay, it's loud for one. I'm not used to this. You know, this is a big game, high expectations, right? I mean, as of now, they can say it's 1 week at a time. And I believe they're trying to do that. But, you know, and Mark's talked about this as well. The Big Ten East is probably as wide open as it's been in a long time, you know, and the king is Ohio State, and Ohio State has their own issues they're working out. As opposed to being 3 steps ahead of Michigan, they may be only 2 this year, based on what we're seeing thus far, right? They have a legitimate chance to do something they haven't done under Harbaugh. So, by all means, this is a huge game, and it's a prove-it game. We all know that, and best believe they know that in their locker room. So how does he handle that kind of pressure for the first time this year on the road? You know, so it's not, you know, it's not going to be a comfortable situation for Cade, no matter how much they try, how much moxie and composure they say he has. You know, you saw it with a CJ versus Minnesota. You know, unless you've been in those shoes, it's tough to just, you know, snap your fingers and be ready to go at it.
It's Big Ten football, man. It's a different beast. So we shall see. Mark, would you be surprised to know, or if I told you that Wisconsin had the #1 rushing defense in the country, would you be shocked to hear that?
That Wisconsin does?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no. Not at all.
You would not be shocked?
I think Dre makes a great point in that just to hit the quarterback situation one more time, that all these things that Cade's facing this week, he didn't get like a road game against a soft opponent. So he gets the road game out of the way. He doesn't get, okay, this is the toughest defense I'm going to face on the schedule, but it's at home. Like he gets hit with all of them at the same time. Tough place to play, one of the toughest places to play in the country. This is the best defense on the schedule. Until I see different, it's the best defense in the conference probably, and probably the best on the schedule. And he may have to, for the first time, Dre said it best when he said, he's made throws, but not when he had to make throws. If he's coming down the field with 3 minutes left in the game and they're down 24-20, you got to make throws now.
Ooh, that's impressive. See, and that was a lot of my preseason, as far as the number that I wanted to see Cade hit with pass attempts, is because, that's the absolute worst situation that you could have, is he's never had to make a throw. And now he's not only has to make a throw, but also all of these other external factors. I have to make a throw. Time's running down. I can't, screw this up. People are yelling, going crazy. I can't hear anything like that. That's just not the ideal, situation. Like even if, the other things are going to happen, right? So the people screaming, it's loud, all that stuff, still gonna be there. But at least I know, 7 or 8 plays, pass plays that I love and I feel comfortable with, and I can run these with my eyes closed. Like I know exactly who's going to be open no matter what the defense is. But at least having that confidence in just what you can control, which are these plays, and I know where my guys will be, like that's a big thing. But I mean, I'm looking at it, and Cade's attempted 53 passes like this season, in the season. 50.
Didn't CJ have over like 51 against Oregon? And like it was like
54.
He had 54. Like, geez,
53 pass attempts all year.
And it's not like, from a scoreboard standpoint, though, Oregon was up like 3 touchdowns. Like that was a close game. I'm sorry. And yeah. By the way, it's not like Ohio State has like no running backs in the barn, and we got to lean on a passing game. You got Travion Henderson and Master Teague, and pretty good running backs themselves, but they can throw the ball too. Look, I'm sorry. Look.
Well, and I'll ask you
this. My wounds affect my speech, so I apologize. But I get.
Let's say that Michigan does get in that situation on Saturday, and say Cade has to throw it 40 times.
Oh.
Like, what's your confidence level in winning that game with that happening?
Pretty small, considering the fact that he's going to essentially have to double his pass attempts in one game. And attempt passes that he just had to attempt. I mean, how many? I'm sure out of 53 pass attempts, I'll be interested to see this. I mean, how many of them were attempted over 20 plus yards?
Yeah.
Like based on memory, I'll probably say at tops 10. That's how, based on memory. So. Mm-hmm. You got a big physical Wisconsin defense. At some point, you're going to have to stretch the field, at least take a shot to Cornelius Johnson or something, Eric All or something, right? It's just sample size does not show that we are prepared for that. So, yeah, it's not.
Mark, I'll ask you the same question. If
can't turn water to wine.
Throw it 40 times in the game. What's your confidence level on them winning that football game?
So I'm going to read a stat line, and you guys tell me who this is, and if you can remember this. This isn't the answer to my question necessarily, but it just makes it a little bit more interesting maybe. 27 for 36, 260 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions.
Ooh.
That sounds like a great. You want us to guess who it is?
Yeah.
Is it this year or is this like in previous years?
Previous years.
My guess would be Graham Mertz last year in one of the earlier games.
Good guess.
I might be wrong. But
he hit 20 for 21 his debut against Illinois.
Yeah, Illinois. Yeah. Oh,
27 for 36 for 264 TDs, no picks in 36 attempts.
I gotta go Fields.
That's a heck of a game.
I'm going Fields.
That's Cade McNamara against Rutgers last year.
Oh, wow.
Jeez. Wow. I mean, I guess I
guess we have nothing to lose. When you have nothing to lose, Joe Milton's been an absolute disaster. You might as well just just rip it, baby.
That's not necessarily my answer. It's just interesting.
I think that shows what he can do. Like, you know what I mean? Like that, and that it really, I think that was the game that for Cade solidified, him being like the starter. Like Milton was just a mess. Cade had to come in and save the day. But like, man, that's interesting. I don't know. I'd love them to just open it up, and I would have loved for that to happen before this upcoming Saturday, but kind of is what it is. You're in the situation.
I just think at this point, guys, I think they are who they are. At least from a strategy standpoint, the coaching staff, I don't see them making some drastic changes to their offensive approach. I think they established what they want to do. Rather it's by necessity or it's by intent. They can say it's by intent, we want to establish the run, go back to the roots of Jim Harbaugh. I personally believe, I can't prove this, I personally believe it's not a necessity because they know their quarterback situation is not ideal in terms of having how can I put this? A passing centric type focus offensively. And so I think they're being safe in most of these games. And I think, and I just don't see throughout the season, especially, and you also got to take into account the parameters going to this season. Harbaugh is on the hot seat. Maybe not in terms of being let go, but definitely the fan base is shaky on him. And from the contract dispute or lack of thereof of extension, how long it took, maybe from an administrative standpoint, in-house, he may be getting that seat may be getting warm, and he knows that. He there's no way he doesn't feel that pressure. So I believe when he came into the season, it was all about safe. Let's get as many wins as possible, and let's not worry about 3 weeks from now. Let's try to get this win right and try to save face. So I don't see them changing. They go. Put it to you this way. They go to Wisconsin. I think they're going to keep the same strategy they always have. They're going to try to pound the ball down Wisconsin's throat. Of course, they're going to try to throw it if they have to, but they're going to try to do that. And if it doesn't work, Saturday work for Wisconsin, they're going to continue to do that. That's just who they are. Because if they were going to do something different, you would have saw flashes of them being a lot, something drastic, something drastically different from an experimental standpoint versus NIU, right? Or, Rutgers or something like that. But you didn't really see that. They are who they are. And it's unfortunate because, it was okay when you had a quarterback like Wilton Spate because you had better talent, better established talent on the outside like Amara Darboll and J.U. Chesson. And, so you even though your quarterback was average, you had NFL caliber receivers, right? So the problem is no playmakers in terms of, receivers, running backs definitely, but in terms of receivers and tight ends, Eric All isn't Jake Butt, right? So it's not like you can lean on those guys to at least get open, right? To make plays for Cade. Cade, really, they're basically in the same boat. They're both trying to figure each other out, find out which one of us is going to carry carry the other.
I got to be perfect, and you got to be perfect. Like
exactly,
one can lift each other up. Like
right,
it's not receivers who are like, hey, just get it out there. I'll snag it.
Exactly,
or, you know what I mean? Or a quarterback where it's just like, the receivers just, it's
I'll throw you open.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of what it comes down to.
Well, and I think part of it, we can kind of continue on to the Michigan defense, but I think, and granted it may be old news, but I think Jim Harbaugh is kind of going back to kind of what he did when he was in San Francisco. It was a run heavy team. They didn't throw it a lot, and they just leaned on their defense to kind of suffocate the other team. and it got him to a Super Bowl. He had success there, and I think it's from everything we've seen, I don't think it's going to change. I think we're going to see, if Cade has 25 pass attempts, it's going to be because Michigan is absolutely forced to throw the ball. Like, I just don't think it's going to be, all of a sudden we see Josh Gaddis come up with a brand new game plan where, we're seeing the ball getting thrown down the field. I think it's going to be the same thing that we've seen the last couple of weeks. So, the defense, though, they have been playing very well. I've been extremely impressed with the defense, especially with how it looked the last couple of years under Don Brown. So, Mark, what are your thoughts as far as just that defense, kind of the game plan for Wisconsin? What do you think we're gonna see?
Yeah, so Wisconsin has the same style offense that they always do, but they're not nearly as effective as they typically are. One reason is because of the other quarterback that we haven't talked about. And maybe this should make Michigan fans feel more comfortable and more confident and maybe more appreciative of the guy that they've got at quarterback, because maybe the biggest difference between Cade McNamara and Graham Mertz going into this game is that with all the lack of production, Cade McNamara has 0 interceptions this year and Graham Mertz has 6. And so if it turns out to be a slugfest, if this is a 17-14 game that's relied on the running game and the defense, and Graham Mertz throws 2 more picks and Cade McNamara doesn't light the world on fire, but he doesn't turn the ball over again and has a clean game, that might be the difference. Mm-hmm. So I think the Michigan defense, Wisconsin, we assume that they've got a great offensive line because they always do, but they really don't. I talked to a Wisconsin guy today that covers Wisconsin football, and they usually develop a great line, but they're not there yet. They don't have a Jonathan Taylor in the backfield, or 2 or 3 of them like they have in the past when they've had Monty Ball and James White in the same backfield. They've had 2 or 3 NFL players sometimes in the same, Corey Clement, on and on. And, Chez Malusi's a transfer in from Clemson, and it's kind of hard to tell whether he's that good of a back because he's been up against it. Penn State really shut him down. Notre Dame really shut him down. And Mertz is kicking the ball. Like, when I say he's kicking the ball around, the reason I said it that way is what came to mind as soon as that I spit that out was there was a key play in the Penn State game where they're in the red zone. They're deep in the red zone. They're like at the Penn State 7, and he just kicks a snap. Like, the snap wasn't great. It was around his ankles, but he kicks it, fumble, lost, and they dominated Penn State for the first half. Penn State could do nothing. Stone cold Penn State, but Penn State hung around because they let them drive between the 30s, and they stopped them, kept stopping them. Either Wisconsin would shoot themselves in the foot or Penn State would stop them. Then Penn State made, a couple explosive plays in the passing game in the second half. And Mertz kept throwing red zone interceptions. Last one was he threw 2 interceptions the last 2 drives of the game where they, it was one of those like drives with about 3.5 minutes where you felt like this is probably the last real chance they have. And he throws a pick. And then, but they get it back because of a deep kickoff or a deep punt, and they pin Penn State back, and Penn State punts. So they get really one more chance. They got about a minute left at about the 50. What's he do? Drives them to about the 20, throws a pick in the end zone. And then last week, if nobody watched the game last week, it was the game I really wanted to see more than any other game, was Notre Dame and Wisconsin. And if you didn't watch the game, you see 41-13. You're like, this wasn't a game. Well, yeah, it was a game. It was a really good game until about 5 minutes left, 6 minutes left. Wisconsin was actually leading the first minute or so of the fourth quarter. You want to hear a stat line, and I know I'm getting away from our Michigan defense subject because I think the Michigan defense I think it's really good. I don't fault them for giving up a couple scoring drives in the second half, because what kind of went along with them giving up those scoring drives was, I don't think it's coincidence that the offense was going 3 and out every time the Michigan defense was giving up scores in the second half. They were just on the field. And Desmond, I think you said that earlier that the defense can only do so much. You know, they're going to get worn down at some point if they're only sitting for 3 or 4 minutes on the sideline for a 3-play drive by the offense 4 consecutive times. So the defense played well, but man, listen to Wisconsin's defensive line from last week. This is a team that gave up 41 points, 6 sacks, 12 tackles for loss, gave up 242 yards of total offense, 3 yards rushing, less than 1 yard rushing per attempt. Kyron Williams, like a top 10 back in the nation, Notre Dame, 18 carries, 33 yards. That's Wisconsin's defense, but their offense and their special teams let them down.
Well, the you know, when your quarterback gives up more points than you do, I mean, it's, you know, because I think he threw a couple pick sixes, if I'm not mistaken. Graham Mertz.
He had 4 in total. I think it was about 4 picks in total.
I mean, he was awful. You know, he was awful. But that defense, that doesn't sound like a recipe for, you know, Blake Corum and Hassan Haskins are going to team up for 300 yards. Like, are you
kidding me? We're doing jet sweeps and you know, it runs up the middle all day, baby. We're going to pound 3 yards in cloud of dust. You know, we don't want to have, like, you know. But here's what I would say to that, Mark. I understand that Wisconsin has their own issues in offensive line. They're still trying to develop. You know, Graham Mertz has struggled with, you know, turnovers, but at least the 2 out of their, you know, 3 or 4 games this year, they've been more battle tested than Michigan has. Get some much better competition, and you cannot win if your quarterback's turning the ball over. I 100% agree with that, and that does play into Michigan's favor. That actually does give me a little bit more confidence. But you know, you can argue what Penn State and Notre Dame, you know, are the top, at least in the top 15 teams in the country right now. Compared to, like, I wouldn't put any of Michigan's opponents nowhere near that. So it's one of those situations where I can easily see, you know, a Wisconsin team that's 1-2, right? You know, going to play, you know, undefeated Michigan team, and the results look totally different than what the records are, right? So it could be misleading. I mean, Wisconsin's more, I'll put it this way: Wisconsin is more ready to play this game than Michigan is right now in terms of being tested. You know, I mean, Wisconsin's played, they've lost, but a tough game at home, which you can argue they should have won it versus Penn State if the turnovers don't happen. And also a really tough game at Notre Dame in which they could have possibly won. So if Graham Mertz is at least touchdown on half the turnovers that he's made, you know, Wisconsin's going to have a legit opportunity to win that game. And I just, you know, and that's the conundrum of how your schedule plays out. You know, like if you have a weaker schedule in the front end of your season, you know, you can have a prettier record. But, you know, on the flip side, if you have some tougher opponents, you can have some crucial losses, but it may not be indicative of the true caliber of team you really are. So that's the tough part in terms of, okay, how do we look at this?